Hamdan Ballal, who is one of the Palestinian co-directors of the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land, was lynched by a group of Israeli settlers. He was beaten, and he was taken to an unknown location. And the only reason I believe that he ended up being freed is because enough people said something, because he now has name recognition due to his winning an Oscar less than a month ago. Won an Oscar for No Other Land. And here's him reacting to being released by Israel.
It was about violence that Palestinians face in the West Bank. Well, now he is a part of his own story. Oscar-winning Palestinian filmmaker Hamdan Ballal has now been released by Israeli police after he was among 3 people arrested for an altercation with Israeli settlers last night. The IDF claiming that the group threw rocks at Israelis and later at police who tried to break it all up. Ballal was actually hospitalized, but he's on his way home now. Our Matt Rivers joins us from Tel Aviv. He had a chance to speak to him from his hospital bed. Matt, what did he tell you about everything and how it went down?
Yeah, Kira, we got a call from one of his friends who was actually with Hamdan Ballal in his hospital room. We got him on the phone and we asked him what happened. What he says happened is very different than what you hear from authorities. What he says happened is that there was a group of Jewish settlers that had come into...
Yeah, describing it as being arrested. Yep, he was arrested. No, he wasn't. No, he was kidnapped.
His village. That had been happening more frequently, he says, since he won the Oscar a few weeks ago. They were attacking residents. They were being violent, including to his neighbor. At some point, Ballal came outside, was filming them. They turned their attention to Ballal. He ran back to his house. He tried to stand in front of his door because his family was inside. And he told us that's when he was attacked. So we were actually about to do a live shot with you, Kira, last hour when we spoke to Ballal. So you'll see as we play this soundbite here, I'm actually standing in the same position just an hour ago. Here's what he said.
So he was beaten in his home by Israeli settlers, people who are on his land illegally. Just remember that. And they are acting in a way where they recognize they have total impunity. Because the state supports them, and because this is not something that like the media is, unless their hand is forced, that Western media is not going to report on it. This happens all the time. You have to think about how many Palestinians, and there's thousands, who have been beaten, who have been kidnapped, who have been killed, and it doesn't get any media attention. The only reason this happened is because you had people like Mark Ruffalo tweeting or posting on Instagram, every filmmaker and Academy member should be acting together in protest. No matter where you stand on this issue, this is an attack on our beloved art form of filmmaking. Hamdan Ballal is a political prisoner, and this is an international incident in violation of human rights. Many of us are not surprised by this behavior from the lawless settlers and the IDF. Killed journalists and abducting filmmakers is not an accident, but a design for the eradication of a people and their culture. Free Ballal. It's like Mahmoud Khalil being disappeared for his activism. It is Hamdan Ballal being beaten and kidnapped because of his documentary. Yeah, I mean, this is state violence. This is state violence, whether it is the Trump administration ordering for permanent residents to be disappeared and deported, or the Israeli state working with settlers to cause harm to Palestinians in areas like the West Bank.
Beat me, like hard attack. He's focused just on my head. He's kicked my head like around 10 times. I was bleeding from everywhere from my head. And also there's another soldier, he was kicked me and beat me with a gun.
And so worth noting there, he mentions a soldier. He said he's not sure who the soldiers were, whether they were authorities. It's impossible for us to know who those people were. He said there was also a plainclothes settler there. Both the IDF and Israeli police denying that they were involved in any way in this beating. But regardless, he was then taken into custody, held overnight at an IDF facility and an Israeli police facility. Ultimately, he was questioned and released this morning. Still unclear, Kira, exactly if he is charged with something, if he's still being investigated. He was released by the authorities.
His crime, to be clear, his crime is being Palestinian. Okay? His crime is being Palestinian. He was targeted because he co-directed a documentary that won the Oscar for Best Documentary. That's his crime. And so by saying things like, well, we don't really know yet if he's been charged with something, blah, 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 what you're actually doing is you're planting this seed that he did something to be deserving of that violent attack. And this has been happening in Masafer Yatta, which is why they made this documentary. They made this documentary, and all of it was filmed before October 7th because this has been happening for decades. And they made this documentary to shine a light on the violence that is committed by these settlers in conjunction with the state towards Palestinians on their own land. So to even be like, well, we're not quite sure yet if he's been charged. No, that's not at all what the problem is here. That's not the case. There was one NBC clip where it was almost an accident that they reported accurately, actually calling the settlers a mob that was deputized by the IDF. I can link it if you want. Sure, because it's so rare. It's so rare that we actually see the media call this for what it is.
But we're not exactly sure his status at this point. But he tells me that right now he's afraid for his life because he thinks there's every chance that settlers will come back to his house and try and do this again. But I asked him, why are you speaking out if you're afraid of his life? And he said, by speaking to you, I hope something will eventually change.
Wow. Great get. Our Matt Rivers there in country. Thank you, Matt.
Why are you speaking out if you're afraid for your life? So I think that perfectly exemplifies the Western mindset towards Palestinians who draw attention to themselves through activism, be it on campuses, through the medium of film, where it's like, okay, well, if this is gonna make you a target, then why do you do it? It's because it's been happening to them for so long, and they are using the tools that are that are available to them. Hamdan Ballal does not have anything other than his camera. That is the way that he can try and fight back against the apartheid and occupying forces. Yeah, like he's already at risk. He's already faced risks for simply being Palestinian. It was before he was returned, but it's here.
To some developing news now out of the Middle East, where the Israeli co-director of the Academy Award-winning documentary No Other Land says one of his Palestinian co-directors has been, in his words, lynched. In a post in just the last hour, Yuval Abraham says his co-director, Hamdan Ballal, was beaten and was hurt in his head and his stomach. He also says soldiers got onto the ambulance he called, and there's been no sign of Ballal since. Our team is out to the Israeli Defense Forces for comment on those allegations. I want to show you Ballal here at the Oscars. There he is holding it. He's got the all-black suit on. We've talked a lot about this documentary on the show, No Other Land. It's this co-production between Israeli and Palestinian filmmakers looking at illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. But even with this huge Oscar win, it's struggling to get any distributor to pick it up in the United States. I want to get to Matt Bradley, who is following these late-breaking developments for us in Tel Aviv. Matt, what do we know?
Yeah, I mean, this is a situation that has really happened in just the past couple of hours. And what we're seeing now is kind of a typical situation from what we've been seeing in the past from Mustafa Yatta. Which,
by the way, they've already been targeted. Bassel Adra, after his win at Berlinale, and also Yuval Abraham, they both faced death threats. They had risks. There were threats to their lives. And of course, it's all the more serious for Bassel because he is Palestinian. Because as he said, an Oscar win is nice, but I return back to my reality. And my reality is that my people are facing, my people are oppressed. My people face violence on a daily basis, that they are, that they crush our homes and they take our lands and they maim and murder us. And so, and it's not surprising, but it is disgusting to see the silence from these international film festivals like Berlinale, where these guys won the best documentary at that film festival. It's disgusting to see the silence from the Academy. This is an Academy Award winner who just a couple weeks ago was at your ceremony and was kidnapped and beaten, and most likely the only reason that he was released from where the military was detaining him was because of his notoriety. Was because enough people online were like, we're outraged. We're aware of this and we're talking about it because of the fact that he had just won an Oscar.
Which is the scene of that documentary that won that Oscar, and as you mentioned, wasn't getting any pickup in the United States. And this was, a scene that could have been cut from the documentary itself. We saw, according to the people who were there, and according to other filmmakers who were there, and according to Jewish American activists who witnessed the scene itself, it turns out that Hamdan Ballal, who was one of the co-directors, the Palestinian co-director, who is a resident of Mustafa Yatta, he was saying that he was attacked by settlers who were in the vicinity. They were masked. They were attacking not just him, but also the activists who were with him. These activists were from the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. Again, they were about.
Also, if you watch the documentary, this happens repeatedly in the documentary. And this all was before October 7th. Reminder. This is the West Bank. Hamas is not the ruling body in the West Bank. This all happened before October 7th. And what you see repeatedly in the documentary is settler violence, is violence that is perpetrated, but also, the violence of settlers is protected by the state, by the military and the police. They all work together. They all collaborate on this. And they have been pushing Palestinians out of areas like Mustafa Yatta. They've been forcing them. They've been forcing them like back into caves.
Half a dozen Jewish American activists who were recording this, they said, and Yuval Abraham, who is the co-director along with Hamdan Ballal, said that he had injuries to his head and his stomach. He was bleeding, and that he was put in an ambulance, and that Israeli soldiers, and we don't know if they were actually Israeli soldiers, there were people who were dressed as Israeli soldiers. And one of the things, Hallie, about that situation in that particular part of the West Bank, and actually in a lot of the West Bank, is that Israeli soldiers, or that settlers are deputized by Israeli soldiers, and they wear Israeli.
I'm gonna be charitable here and say maybe he's saying we don't know if they were even actual soldiers, although there's no difference. There's no difference. It's like when we say find the difference between these cops and the KKK. There's no difference. Okay, you pull the mask off a KKK hood wearing freak, and you might find a police officer under there. So the settlers the settlers will sometimes dress up as soldiers, even though it's not like the soldiers themselves. It's not like the cops and the military in Israel are not also enacting violence upon Palestinians in the West Bank, or like turning to the side, looking away as settlers come in and beat them, murder them, take their homes, take their things. I hate how they're avoiding saying that the soldiers are actively a part of this. Right, because that is the truth. So it doesn't matter if these if these soldiers were really settlers in disguise. The soldiers do this as well. And it was the military that detained him. Now, again, this is before he was freed and more information came out.
These soldier uniforms, even though they are settlers. And I've been out there, they don't have markings, they don't have rankings on their epaulets, so you can't tell who they are, you can't tell what their ranks are, you can't tell what their names are or their numbers.
But like this is still refreshing from most of mainstream media, where they're talking about how settlers are deputized, where like settlers are a part of really a part of the military.
Are so in a way they're able to do these deeds with impunity. They went into the ambulance where Hamdan Ballal was being held, where he was injured, and they came and they arrested him. And now these filmmakers and these activists don't really know exactly where he is. And so they're tweeting and they're trying to report what's going on. But this is, again, this is a scene that could be cut from the movie itself. So this is sort of, you know, this documentary coming to life.
Thanks for watching.
Oh, I did not mean to click on Daryl Hannah's main attraction. What the fuck? Yeah. So that is something that you just don't hear a lot from mainstream media, is any type of connection between settler violence and the state, where you will have outlets condemn Israeli settlers, but they won't connect it to, they won't emphasize how it is the state of Israel that encourages and enables these settlers, protects them. I mean, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, these guys, these are settlers. There are past and current members of the Israeli government that are literally settlers that grew up in these settlements. In a separate account, the Israeli military said 3 Palestinians had been detained on suspicion of hurling rocks. Oh, I wonder why they hurl rocks. That's the other thing about it, is I love how Zionists will go, well, actually, the real crime that was committed here, the real violence that was committed here, were Palestinians throwing rocks. Why are they throwing rocks? Also, do you think that rocks are more serious than guns? Do you think that these settlers who show up with their guns, the military and the police who show up with just full military gear, do you think that these scary rocks, they're just no match for these very, very scary rocks? It's so bitch-made behavior. It is. Under international law, they qualify as combatants, so it's okay to murder them en masse even when they're minors. Right. It's like you'll see a picture of a child throwing a rock at a tank, and then you'll have found out that they just murdered that child. And it's like, yeah, well, the child threw a rock at the tank. It's like, well, why do you think that child threw a rock at that tank? What does that tank represent in that child's life? What has that child dealt with in just their short amount of time existing? And then also, what happens to that child when they throw a rock? That they're ripped away from their parents, that they are detained. They're administratively detained for however long. That in some cases they're shot and killed. But oh, the scary rocks. One Israeli civilian was involved in a violent confrontation between Israelis and Palestinians. And it just this just maddens me so much. It maddens me that meanwhile we have, there was all that stupid drama in Miami with the attempts to remove funding for the independent cinema that was showcasing that was going to be that was showing No Other Land. Now, this is a silver lining here. This is a silver lining because enough people got pissed off. Enough people in the Miami Beach community got so angry over the mayor trying to cancel this independent cinema's lease and to take funding from them that he had to give up. He had to capitulate. Right. So it's okay, yeah, the real fear and problem here is that a documentary like No Other Land is anti-Semitic, that it makes Jewish people feel unsafe. Because what I'm seeing is, what I watched was a documentary that shows the nonstop attacks on Palestinians in a village, in Masafer Yatta, a village in the West Bank, and how this has been going on for decades. And then I see the filmmaker, one of the filmmakers who's Palestinian, who returned to his village after the biggest film award show in the world, the Oscars, and after he had won an Oscar there, who was then targeted, who was beaten and kidnapped by the settlers working in conjunction with the military. So I actually think the problem here is not that a documentary is going to make Jewish people feel badly.